And there we are, guys. So of course, take a look at the inside of this bread. I mean, it is just perfect. Hey guys, it's the Keto King here, and today we are making a keto bread. So this is the follow-up video to my last keto bread I made, and that keto recipe was made using a bread maker or a bread machine. That video is titled The Best Keto Bread Ever. Why, you ask? Because it absolutely is the best keto bread I have tasted. So check it out. I'll put a link in the top corner of the screen now. However, I did have a lot of comments asking if this keto bread could be made without a bread maker. So I've been testing the version of this bread without a bread maker, and I'm going to show that to you today. So the ingredients you'll need to make this keto bread or low carb bread are some salt, some vital wheat gluten, xanthan gum, some oat flour, some flaxseed meal, butter, eggs, some yeast, and some honey to react with the yeast. Don't panic about the honey, it gets consumed or eaten up by the yeast, so you don't actually consume this, but in any event, we're only using 1 teaspoon of this, so it won't affect the carbohydrate level of this keto bread much at all. Let's get right to this keto bread recipe. So this is the sister recipe of that keto bread recipe. It tastes just as good, is equally amazing, so it's perfect for you guys who don't have a bread machine or aren't wanting to invest in a bread machine. Don't forget, you can also pick up a really cheap secondhand one too, and that will work just great for that recipe. Okay, so grab yourself a mixing bowl, and we're going to add in all of the dry ingredients less the yeast. So we're not going to add the yeast into here. I'm going to start off with 2/3 of a cup of flaxseed meal. Remember, you can just grind up your own flax seeds in a grinder to get flaxseed meal if you don't buy it store-bought like this. Then we're going to be putting in 1/2 cup of oat fiber. Now guys, this is the fiber from oats. It is not oat flour. Those are two separate things. So this is purely fiber, 0 net carbs for this ingredient. Then we're going to be adding in 1 1/4 cups of vital wheat gluten. Again guys, this is the gluten from the wheat. There is no wheat in here. This is just the gluten extracted from the wheat. So yes, if you are gluten intolerant, this bread unfortunately is not going to work for you. However, if you don't have any issues with gluten, neither should this bread give you any issues. Next, 1/2 teaspoon of xanthan gum, and then 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm using pink Himalayan salt here. Alright, then just give that a mix to fully incorporate all of these dry ingredients. So we put our dry ingredients to the side here. Next, we're going to grab our wet ingredients. Now you're going to need 1 cup of water here. Now I highly recommend getting a thermometer if you don't have one. This water should be between 50 and 55 degrees centigrade. Now, so make sure you get it accurate. You don't want it too hot, that'll kill the yeast, and too low, and it's not going to activate the yeast enough. Now for this one, we need it between 50 and 55 degrees centigrade, but for the bread machine one, remember that only needs to be around 23 to 25 degrees. So just remember that when seeing the two different recipes here. Okay, so I've got this just about 50 degrees. Then we're going to add in our yeast. Now we're using instant yeast here. This one says quick rise. That's the same thing as instant yeast. The one we used in the bread machine was active dry yeast or traditional yeast. Now this recipe is originally from Deirdre's Kitchens channel. So when using instant yeast, you don't need to proof it. Now proofing yeast is putting the yeast into water and essentially activating that yeast. Typically you only do that for active dry yeast, which has a coating on it, so you need to rehydrate that yeast to actually get that yeast active and doing its good job of creating CO2 and thereby helping the bread rise. With instant yeast, you don't need to actually proof it. You can add this straight to the dry ingredients and it would work fine. I in fact did a test batch of adding the yeast into the dry ingredients, and I'll put some pictures of how that turned out on the screen now. It turned out really nicely. It just seemed to collapse a little from the top after it came out the oven. So we're going to give it a go, putting this yeast directly into the water, essentially proofing it, even though this isn't needed for this instant yeast. Because as Deirdre said, well, let's just try to give it as best chance as possible for this yeast to work. So we're going to be adding in 8 grams of yeast into this water. Give that a stir to fully mix in the yeast. Then we're going to be adding in 1 teaspoon of the honey. Now the honey, as I mentioned earlier, is for the yeast. The yeast reacts with a sugar. It needs the sugar to react with. So we put this in. The yeast actually consumes or eats up the sugar in this honey. So don't worry, you're not ingesting this. And anyway, it's 1 teaspoon spread out between the entire loaf. So even if you are ingesting it, it's really not a lot of carbohydrates. So give that a good mix. You want to make sure that the honey's fully dissolved in the water. Okay, give that a few minutes there. Then we're going to grab 2 eggs and we're just going to lightly beat them. You don't want to go too crazy with them. And then we've got 2 tablespoons of butter here, which I popped in the microwave for a bit just to soften it up so it's nice and really soft. This needs to be soft or at room temperature, as do the eggs. Right, then we're going to put this in a stand mixer. Now, if you don't have one of these, don't panic. You absolutely can do this recipe without this mixer, but it just means you're going to be kneading by hand, which is going to take a lot of time. So again, if you're in a pinch and you cannot borrow one from a friend or a neighbor, like I borrowed this one, then absolutely you can hand knead it. Just Google search on how to hand knead bread. But we're going to use this today, making it a lot quicker. So we're going to add in our yeast, honey, and water mixture, in the 2 lightly beaten eggs, and then we're going to add in the butter. Okay, we're then going to grab our dry ingredients that we put aside and just add that directly into the mixture here. We're just going to use the regular mixing utensil here. We're not going to put on the kneading hook just yet. This is just going to help incorporate all those ingredients. So just turn this on at a slow pace. Again, we're just incorporating the wet and the dry, making sure they're all fully combined together. Okay, now it is difficult to get a good shot of this for you, but I hope you can see what's actually going on in here. So you see this nicely incorporated. That should be fine. We don't need to do this any longer. Lift up your mixer. Obviously get all the dough off the mixing blade or the mixing tool or utensil. All right, and then you're going to need a kneading hook that looks a little something like this. And before you do that, I just like to get a spatula and just give it one more quick scoop around in the bowl, making sure it gets into a nice ball-like dough. Pop in your kneading hook. And now you're going to put this machine onto a medium pace. Halfway, wherever it is halfway on your machine, put that there. Now be careful, make sure to keep an eye on the machine because it does actually move around a lot. Now if you can see what's happening at the bottom of this machine, it's actually the dough is not quite getting fully engaged by the hook. If that happens for a prolonged period of time, all you need to do is simply just stop the machine, lift it up, just move around the dough in the actual stand mixer. Okay, so reposition it, just gather all of the dough together again into essentially a ball. Reposition your kneading hook and then go again. Okay, so this has been going for around 3 or 4 minutes now. I'm going to take this dough off of this kneading hook. Okay, and just reposition it again at the bottom, maybe flipping it over a couple times. Reposition the kneading hook again, and do it again for another 3 minutes or so. Alright, so that's been about 7 minutes now that we've been kneading this. So look, this is what it ends up with, like a beautiful dough we've got here. So as I said, I did this for around 7 minutes, kneading it in the stand mixer. Obviously, if you're doing it by hand, it's going to take significantly longer than that. So I highly recommend a stand mixer if you can get your hands on one. But don't go and buy a stand mixer if you don't have one, because you should rather buy a bread machine. Make the keto bread recipe using the bread machine, because that is much simpler than this recipe. So I previously made the bread in this container, which is a 9.5 inch by 5.25 inches by 2.75 inches, right? So that's what it looks like there. It rose nicely, but it didn't quite rise as high as I would like. Well, it dropped a little bit after rising. So I bought this container. I'll put the dimensions of this container on the screen now, but it's a slightly higher rise tin. It's not as long as this one, but I think it's going to give it a nice high rise. So just position your dough into something that looks like the shape of your bread tin. Just pop it inside like that. So then you're going to grab yourself some plastic wrap or cling wrap, whatever you call it. And then you're going to use a non-stick spray and give it a nice generous coating of this non-stick spray all over one side. You may need an extra pair of hands to help you out with this. And then just lightly cover the bread tin with the plastic wrap like this. You don't need to or don't want to completely tighten the seal here because obviously this is going to rise, but just loosely drape the sides over the bread tin. All right, then what you want to do firstly is grab yourself just a bowl or a cup or a mug of water, make it hot water, and then you're going to put your microwave on for a couple minutes. Now what that's going to do is the water is obviously going to start boiling. It's going to firstly heat up the microwave. Secondly, it's also going to create a nice moist and humid environment in the microwave. Now this is what I found my research and experimenting with this keto bread recipe is that you need a moist and warm environment to get the full rise out of the bread. If you read in the comments on DJ's video, a lot of people have complaints about the bread not rising, and I found this is what you need to do to get that bread to fully rise. So while that's going in the microwave, you also want to get the kettle boiling too. Throughout this process, while we are allowing this keto bread to rise, we're going to constantly put in fresh batches of boiling water in that bowl or a cup that you're using and sub that out every 10-15 minutes or so. That's just again going to keep that hot, humid, moist environment in the microwave, which is going to give your keto bread the best rise. Okay, and then we're going to take our bread dough that's in the bread tin like that, covered with the plastic wrap. Now you can see the steam and the nice humidity in there. We're going to pop the bread in, close it quickly because you obviously want to keep in that heat and moisture, and then we're going to let this bread rest. Now the last time I did this, I let the bread rise for around 2.5 hours. It probably didn't rise much after the 2-hour mark, but again, you're just going to have to see and judge when you see that the bread is no longer rising or getting bigger anymore.
2 hours later.
Alright guys, so it's been 2 hours now, and look at this rise here. That's pretty impressive. As you can see, it's still got that nice hot water that's being replaced every 10 to 15 minutes. So let's get this out. Alright, take a look at that. Crazy head on that one. Okay, we take that off. And then we put this in your preheated oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to put this in for 25 minutes. Alright, it's been just 25 minutes, so let's take a look at how it is doing. Oh, baby. Look at this. How good does this look? Crazy, right? Yeah, buddy. And you end up with a low-carb keto bread like this. Oh my goodness, guys. How crazy is this? Just look at this. I'm actually really impressed that it came out just in the stand mixer as good as it did come out in the bread machine. As I said to you, that bread pan I was using is slightly higher and shorter, so that's why it's a really nice high loaf here, like a really nice tall loaf, which I'm thrilled about. We've got a nice golden color on the top. But yeah, guys, you can't go wrong with this, man. Just look at this wonderful loaf of bread. And again, it smells like real bread. This is what you want, guys. I mean, those keto breads are good as a substitute. And again, this is a substitute. It's not meant to be the exact same thing as regular bread. But man, this comes pretty close. Oh, that smell, you just cannot beat it. All right, guys, and now it's time to slice into this beautiful keto bread that we've got here. So let's give it a go. And there we are, guys. So of course, take a look at the inside of this bread. I mean, it is just perfect. As close as I've ever seen a keto bread getting to regular bread. I mean, the feel on this is just absolutely perfect. And then look at these absolutely ridiculously good slices for a keto bread. I mean, that crust looks like a regular bread, and inside is beautifully soft. Seriously, once you try this keto bread, you're not going to go back. This is what you want. And of course, you see the makings of a beautiful keto sandwich here, which I'm sure you haven't had in a very long time. But I'm going to give this a taste test and make sure this tastes as good as it looks. So here we go. Wow. Seriously guys, this is ridiculously good. I said this in my previous keto bread video. If someone gave this to me and didn't tell me what this was, I would not suspect this was a low carb bread. Just look at this. I took a bite. I mean, that inside is perfectly formed. It holds together just like regular bread. And also, interesting one, I tried this particular version I did without the sweetener. The previous version called for 4 tablespoons of erythritol. I completely omitted it from this one. And you know what? It tastes just as good. Look, it does taste different from the one where the sweetener was actually added. So you know what? Just play around with that and see what you prefer. Maybe try 2 tablespoons of the sweetener and see how you like it. Generally, the sweetener is added to try and mimic or copy the regular bread because, of course, regular store-bought bread has sugar added to it. It brings a slight level of sweetness. It doesn't make it a sweet bread, but that's what generally the public is accustomed to. So that's why we add the sweetener in here. Again, experiment, see what works for you. I'm honestly madly in love with this keto bread recipe. As mentioned earlier, the original recipe comes from Deirdre's Kitchen, which I'll put a link to in the description box below. But I have modified this recipe slightly and given a little more guidance to make sure you guys get that perfect rise and get that perfect loaf of keto bread. Thanks for watching guys. Smash that thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video. Let's talk in the comment section. You know I love hearing from you guys. And of course, if you make this awesome keto bread, please tag me on Instagram at @the_keto_king. I love to see you guys killing it in your keto lifestyle. So, ending this video, I want to conclude with 2 points here. One, while this stand mixer does work great, if you have a bread machine, use the bread machine recipe rather. It is so much easier, much quicker, and to be honest, the bread comes out even better than this one, if you can believe that. So either get yourself a bread maker if you don't have one, get one on the cheap, a second-hand or used one, or if you don't want to do that, then use the stand mixer. Again, don't buy a stand mixer if you don't have one, borrow one, or if you're going to invest in something, invest in a bread machine. That's my recommendation. For the bread machine, try get a horizontal bread machine, not the vertical ones, because the vertical ones don't get you this really nice looking loaf like this. It produces more of a square shaped bread, which while it will still taste good, aesthetics is half the battle of the game, right? So look for a horizontal machine. My bread machine is a 2.5 pound one, but I think a 2 pound bread machine would work just fine. If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss new awesome keto recipes like this one. And of course, keep it keto.